Alright, what's up guys? Kane with XBLA Fans, and I'm going to be walking you through the different pitches available to you in Super Mega Baseball, as well as kind of explaining to you what they're used for in general. So what you're going to notice is that all your starting pitchers have 4 to 5 pitches available to them, whereas your relievers are going to have 2 to 3. Every pitcher will have at least a fastball and an off-speed pitch. Potentially, you could have 4 seams, cut fastballs, 2 seams, sliders, screwballs, changeups, forkballs, and curveballs. All of those could potentially be available to you throughout the course of the game, and I'm going to try to walk you through what each one is and what it actually would be used for in the course of a game. So the gist of things is, when you go through an order, you're going to want to try to make sure you're breaking up hitters' timing. That's what you really want to do. You never want to allow someone to get used to what you're throwing to them, be able to pick up a pattern. You want to be able to disrupt them. Now, in actual Major League Baseball, something you'll notice pretty common, the number 1 pitch thrown is a 4-seam fastball. In fact, depending on what stats you're looking at, it could be anywhere up to about 30 to 40% of pitches thrown in Major League Baseball are going to be a 4-seamer. And they're going to travel somewhere around like 93 miles an hour. That's why the guys who can throw 100 are so potent, because that's abnormal. So an MLB fastball could be anywhere from, 85 to 100. Some guys a little bit higher than that, but not consistently. And I mean, what you're going to use this for is this is your bread and butter. This is what you're going to typically want to throw, making a guy chase. It's deadly when it's up high. You can kind of jam people. A 4-seam fastball in general actually rises a little bit, which is something that's kind of cool about it. So a 4-seamer is actually going to go up in the air a little bit when it's thrown, and that kind of helps you out a little bit. Now, what makes a 2-seam fastball a little bit different is a 2-seamer will cut in on the hand you're throwing with it, as well as move downward a little bit. So that makes it something that you can kind of make move a little bit. It kind of sinks a little, and it's going to end up lower in the zone. It's a nice pitch. It's typically a little slower, and by a little slower, I mean substantially slower. And it's a pretty devastating pitch to use in your arsenal. Typically for me, I'm going to throw 2-seamers down in the zone, and that's a pitch I'm going to be using if I'm trying to induce ground ball contact. Changeups are another pitch that you can use to kind of, break a hitter's timing up. Now, one thing that you're going to want to be aware of, at least in Major League Baseball, typically changeups are used substantially more against same hand, same hitting matchups. So righty-righty, lefty-lefty, that's when you're going to see a lot more changeups. If you know your opponent is kind of just sitting back waiting for a fastball, a changeup can honestly be the thing that gets you the strikeout. It's pretty clutch. Definitely be careful when you leave them in the middle of the zone, because they will likely get punished. They're incredibly devastating, but especially if you can place them in a good spot. Now, a curveball, especially in Super Mega Baseball, is another pitch that you have to be pretty careful of where you put it. It's a devastating pitch for inducing, swinging strikeouts. It's one of the slowest pitches in Major League Baseball. It's probably going to be one of the slowest pitches in Super Mega Baseball. And what that means is if you leave it in the middle of the zone, if someone's aware that it's a curveball, they can kind of sit on it and absolutely destroy it. However, if you've got someone who is sitting on fastballs and you want to just mess with their timing, this is one of the best pitches to just kind of confuse them a little bit. You throw this down in the zone and let it drop out to where it's no longer a strike. It can be pretty devastating, especially if you're working it with something like a changeup as well, because you can kind of just confuse the batter as to what they're seeing. I mean, when it comes down to it, the biggest thing with pitching in Super Mega Baseball is to make sure that you don't have a consistent pattern that's predictable. Now, one of the cool things about the curveball, obviously, is that it's just really, really devastating with the amount of movement, and that is definitely accentuated with the 12 to 6 curveballs you're going to see in Super Mega Baseball. Now, a slider is a lot faster in general than most of the other breaking ball pitches, and that's why it's probably one of the more used ones, because a slider is really, really good against same-handed batters again. Because what it's going to do is it's going to let you kind of throw that thing out to where it curves out and it makes it harder for the batter to hit it. So against lefties, a lefty throwing at a lefty, you can throw that on that outside corner of the plate where it just kind of curves out. And that makes it virtually unhittable, to be perfectly honest. And that's really, really devastating. I mean, same thing with righties as well, but historically in baseball, I think of a lot more of lefties struggling against lefties, likely because of the smaller population of left-handed pitchers to begin with. Pitches left, the next most common, at least in pro play, would be a cutter. Now, a cut fastball is a mix of a slider and a fastball. It's basically a much faster slider that still has a little bit more movement than you would expect in a fastball. If you throw it correctly, it breaks away from a hitter right as it reaches the plate, making it really devastating. So it's one of the kind of fastest growing pitches when it comes to like young pitchers today, because you can think of guys who were absolutely devastating with it in the past, like Mariano Rivera, who used to just absolutely make people look silly with this pitch. So, people growing up watching that, they saw that, and it's kind of one of those things that people are kind of trying to replicate now. And it's a really good pitch when used correctly. Now, a screwball is actually kind of random to be included in this game because it's probably one of the least common pitches when it comes to professional baseball today. It kind of works a lot like a slider or a curveball, but instead of moving in the direction of a slider or a curveball, it breaks the opposite direction. So it allows a right-handed pitcher to kind of throw that pitch that makes it really hard for a lefty, and vice versa. There's some cool things you can do with this pitch. It's something to definitely consider, especially because if someone doesn't know you have it and isn't paying much attention, you're going to catch them off guard at least a couple times with it. So a forkball is very similar to what would be considered a split finger fastball, except it kind of drops off even more dramatically. So think of something similar to 12-6 curveball, but a little bit faster at times, and it can do some absolutely bonkers stuff. It's not the most common pitch, but think of someone like Tim Lincecum, who used to kind of just destroy people with it before he fell off the face of the map. There are some things you can definitely do with this pitch. So when it comes down to it, you're probably going to rely mostly on your fastball, your two-finger fastball, and your slider. You can also obviously use a changeup and a curveball for a change of pace. And don't forget that a cut fastball, a screwball, a forkball, and a curveball, when placed well, can be absolutely devastating. So when it comes down to it, make sure you're actually placing the ball well on the plate or off the plate, preferably off the plate, to where you can get the batter to feel kind of like they're in a funk. You don't want them to feel like they're able to hit their groove. You don't want them to feel like they can time the pitches right. And you don't want them to know where to expect the ball to be. In a perfect world, you don't even want them to know whether or not you're going to throw a strike on your next pitch. Because if you can get them guessing and you can get them chasing to where they're chasing curveballs in the dirt, they're chasing sliders that are flying outside the zone, they're looking for fastballs and accidentally just swinging way too early at your changeups, you're going to absolutely destroy them. From my experience so far, the fastball is 100% the hardest pitch to hit online. So if you're facing someone who's got their timing down and they actually are not swinging at stuff outside the zone, make sure you're not throwing things into the strike zone, like curveballs or changeups, because they will probably get smashed. The fastball is going to kind of want to be the thing you rely on, and you're definitely going to want to paint the corners of the strike zone and maybe the top and bottom, outside, inside, just barely on the, middles. But you don't ever want to throw straight down the middle of the plate. You're going to struggle if you do that. Thank you guys so much for checking this video out. I really do appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know, and later.